Hi, welcome back to part two. And in part two, what I'm going to talk about is what is fair use. So we're going to kind of break down what is fair use and how does it impact how I use resources for my classroom. Okay, so to get it started, again, set a little context. We have heard as educators for a very long time, and maybe you as students going through the system, that, it's fair use. It's fair to use the material. But what we don't understand is that there's a copyright law surrounding what we can and cannot use, or what parts we can use and how much we can use. So for the purpose of usually, and fair use states this, that for the purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research, it's not an infringement of copyright. But what people fail to do is kind of go deeper into that law to see what fair use means. Okay, so we're going to kind of dig deeper into understanding and breaking that fair use apart. Some of the things that you will commonly hear, kind of not statements, and again, it goes back to just, is it because we haven't been educated on what it is, or do we just choose to ignore it because we think we know what it means? So fair use is often used as an excuse for copying rather than a well thought out reason for copying something. And I think that's really, really important. I can use it. I'm using it for school, so I'm okay. It benefits the students. I'm doing it for my students, so it's okay. And the ever popular one is, hey, we're not making any money on it. I'm just using it in my classroom. So it should be okay. Well, in fact, it's not like these answers aren't correct or they aren't commonly heard, but we really have to break it down a little bit better. And as digital citizens, as educators who are being those digital citizens, we have to think about this a little bit more. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break down fair use for you in 4 criteria. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background. Your readings will help that maybe a little bit. There's not a lot of text around these. It's just kind of comprehending what the statements mean, and I'll try to help with that a little bit. But as we think about using something in our classroom, what we are supposed to do is we are supposed to measure what we're using with these 4 fair use guidelines. So this is actually something that I really just need you to learn. I need you to memorize these 4 criteria for fair use, because in and of itself, every time, and it almost needs to become a natural reaction, that when I decide to make a video in the classroom, okay, check 1, 2, 3, 4. Am I okay? Yes, no, move on. Okay, so it's almost like that reaction, that because I understand these concepts, I can go through them really quickly, but it's understanding, okay, what does this mean and how can I move forward with using the materials that I want to use, or what can I use? Okay, so for this example, the first one is the purpose and the character of the use. So this one is pretty easy to kind of figure out, right? The purpose is, what am I using it for? And if we say, it's really almost 2 decisions. Is it commercial or is it for nonprofit education? And for the most part, when we're dealing with it, it's going to be that nonprofit educational use. So this would typically pretty be a tick in the good for being able to use whatever you're trying to use. Okay, so that's the first criteria. The second criteria is a little bit more complicated. It's not complicated, it's just a little bit harder to understand, I think. And as we do more examples, especially in our face-to-face, I think we'll have a better understanding of this. But it's the nature of the copyrighted work. If we look at this, the nature, it's the best way that I have to explain it, and I'm sorry if I'm not explaining it very well, but I see it as kind of a continuum. On this side of the continuum, it's like, these are like fact-based. It's just everything is there. Historically, it's just easy. People, it's kind of information that we just know. An easy one to give as an illustration is like the Declaration of Independence. Okay, even though we can't just take it and copy it, I'm not saying that, but it's kind of just facts. It's not very creative. It's information that way. So that's like on one side. The other part of the continuum, or at the other end, this is when something is highly creative. It has an art form. Someone has done it. Nobody else has done it really. It's highly creative. So it's figuring out, okay, when I see something, where is it on that continuum? The more it's over to highly creative, the more, or it's more likely you probably shouldn't be using it. Okay? So think of your creative works. Those are a little bit more dangerous about using and then, replicating in the classroom or something. Okay? So I know that one is kind of like mud. It's like, well, I'm not sure I really understand that, but it's hard without specific examples. And I guess why I'm not giving you a total specific example is that's part of your homework, okay, is to wrestle with a specific example. And then we'll talk about that more. Okay, they get easier, okay? So purpose, the nature of the work, okay? This is pretty straightforward. The amount to be copied in relation to the work as a whole. Okay, so the amount that you're copying. So the rule is the greater the amount used, the more likely that the use is not fair. The greater the amount used, the more likely that the use is not fair. So if I use something in its entirety, then that's where we're usually getting a little bit dicey on, whether we should be using it or not. Typically, we can use partial amounts, not something whole, okay? And again, I'm thinking of classroom uses and so forth, okay? So, again, kind of wrestle with this. When we meet face-to-face, I will specifically talk about the amounts that you can use, but going into that, let's just kind of critically think about, okay, how are you interpreting the amount to be copied? Okay? The last one. This one is probably like number one. It's fairly easy to at least understand. The effect of the use upon the potential market value of the copyrighted work. So this is like the example, if I use it and how I use it, am I impacting the potential market value of something. So am I taking money away if I use it? Okay. So again, I'm going to kind of leave it at that. But as you think about it, again, the greater the market or profit effect, the less likely that you or the court will conclude that the use is fair. Okay, so again, if I'm going to impact somebody else getting money as a result of me using that, I probably can't use it. Okay, so you have 4, and you're going to memorize them. Okay, purpose, nature, amount, how much are you using, nature, creative, fact-based, amount, and then impact on potential market or value. Okay, those kinds of things. So those are the 4 things that you have to consider. Okay, so that is kind of an explanation of kind of situating you into fair use, what it means, what those 4 criteria are. And now what I want you to do is move on to part 3 when you're ready. And in part 3, what you're going to be doing is you are going to be given a scenario, and in that scenario you are going to kind of analyze that scenario using these 4 criteria. And then you're going to come up with an answer, kind of yes or no. You can either do the scenario or you can't, but you do have to come up with reasoning for one or the other. Okay, so proceed on to that, and then I think we'll be ready for our face-to-face on Tuesday. So thanks so much, and have a great weekend, and keep thinking about copyright and how it impacts what you do and how you do it and how it's modeled for your students. Okay? Thanks a lot.